What is the best dividend ETF? A dividend investing strategy. Welcome to the club. So you like dividend investing, but you don't feel comfortable picking individual companies, or you have a bad track record of picking losers. If this is you, investing in a dividend ETF makes a lot of sense. Or maybe you pick individual companies and invest in ETFs. You are a hybrid. You are a lover and a fighter. You are a romance comedy kind of guy, but you also urinate in the shower. In this video, we are going to see which dividend ETF is the best. The ETF that is better than the rest. Thank you. I'm an amateur rapper. That's like asking a Mormon mom, who's your favorite child? Or asking an Italian, what's the best pizza place? The word best is super subjective. So to make this objective, best will be determined by this checklist. We are going to evaluate the top 10 holdings and quality of the portfolio. Are they evaluating solid companies to be included, or are they just chasing the yield? We will take into consideration the ETF management fee, aka the expense ratio. We will review the ETF past performance. You shouldn't live in the past, but my goodness, as a history nerd, you can learn a lot by studying what happened historically. We will also compare their dividend histories, and finally, we will run a calculation and forecast future returns based on current data. The ETFs in question, by the way, these are the most popular dividend ETFs on the internet based on investing forums, YouTube content, and on Reddit. Number one is going to be DGRO. I'll be referring to this as Dividend Growth. Number two will be SCHD. Number three will be Divi, and last will be SCHD. Everybody and their ex-girlfriend talks about SCHD when it comes to dividend ETFs. Let's see if it really is the king, the goat, the Ragnar Lothbrok of Vikings. Which, by the way, The Last Kingdom is a better show about Vikings than Vikings. If you are at all into the early history of England and the role the pagans played, then this show will butter up your butthole. Once you start, you won't be able to stop. That's what she said. Just look at this handsome face. This is Uhtred of Bevenberg. You will not regret watching The Last Kingdom. Anyways, let's go ahead and move on to the first metric we will consider. SCHD will be first up. Currently has a 4.6% dividend yield, and SCHD has a mission set of investing in the top 80 highest dividend yielding companies in the S&P 500. SCHD fancies large cap companies, and REITs are welcomed too. The name of the game here is dividend yield. The standards to be included seem pretty non-existent, and that's because they're relying on the S&P 500 inclusion criteria to weed out weak companies for them. SCHD currently has 77 holdings in the ETF portfolio. The fund managers can change which companies are included or excluded along with every other ETF in this video. And when we look at the top holdings of SCHD, I'm going to be honest with you, I am not a fan of any of the big dogs in SCHD portfolio. It's represented by oil and gas, finance, paper companies, and old school tech players. This is important because the top 10 holdings in ETF carry the most weight and concentration in a portfolio. The paper companies are an indirect play on the e-commerce industry because of the boxes in which products are shipped. So I kind of like them, but not enough to order them on DoorDash with those ridiculous fees. I wouldn't go out of my way to eat them. I mean, I would not invest in the cardboard packaging industry. Next up is Divi. The current dividend yield is 3.8%, and Divi picks the top 100 highest dividend yielding companies within the Dow Jones. Divi does not invest in REITs. In order for consideration to join Divi, the company must have at least a $2 billion market cap, which means the business should be pretty established, mature, or at least popular in the stock market. Also, the company needs at least 5 years of consecutive dividend payments. The standards to join Divi seem pretty low, but at least it's got more respect for itself. SCHD is basically the guy who will fall in love with any female that gives him eye contact. Divi is the same guy, but at least he has some requirements before he falls in love. And Divi currently has about 99 holdings in their ETF portfolio. And when we look at the top 10 holdings, they have telecom companies, tobacco, finance, and old school tech represented. Next is SCHD, and their current dividend yield is sitting at 3.4%. SCHD follows the Dow Jones Dividend Top 100 Index, which means no REITs. To be included into SCHD, the company must have at least 10 years of consistent dividends, at least a $500 million market cap, and have enough liquidity in the eyes of the fund managers. No single company can be more than 4% of the portfolio as a hedge against risk. And they decide which companies get the most weight in the portfolio based on 4 financial metrics, including the dividend growth rate. I circled the 4 metrics with a red arrow and circle on the screen if you want to see them. It seems like a solid criteria and valuation standard in place for SCHD. This is the guy who comes from old money. money and understands his worth. He won't say yes to just anybody. They're picky. They get their eyebrows tweezed and their leg hair waxed. SCHD currently has 104 holdings in their ETF portfolio. And when we look at the top 10 holdings, I can genuinely say, finally there are some high quality companies represented, unlike Divi and SCHD. Mainly Broadcom, which is a tech company with patents on semiconductors, chips, and is an amazing dividend company. I need to make a video about them. There's also Home Depot, which as you know has a foothold in loyalty among the contractors crowd, solid business, and dividend record. Then there's Coca-Cola, an OG dividend stud. I like what I see with SCHD. Let's move on with Dividend Growth, aka DGRO. Alright, so Dividend Growth follows the Morningstar US Dividend Growth Index, which is basically an index made up of companies that consistently grow their dividend payout year over year. And currently, Dividend Growth has a 2.4% dividend yield. Eligible companies to join Dividend Growth must pay a qualified dividend, must have at least 5 years of uninterrupted annual dividend growth, and their earnings payout ratio must be less than 75%. Pretty simple and straightforward. They don't care about market cap, and they do not like REITs. And I am not making this up. Dividend Growth currently has 420 holdings in the portfolio. 420. Very nice, as Borat once said. Out of all 4 dividend ETFs, Dividend Growth has the best top 10. They have Microsoft, JP Morgan Chase, Broadcom, Apple, and Procter & Gamble. In lieu of chasing the dividend yield, they have prioritized high-quality companies, at least in the top 10. That was a lot. For me, I think the winner based on criteria, profile, and holdings will be Dividend Growth, the ETF you see on your screen right now, followed closely by SCHD, because they actually have a strict checklist to be included into the Cool Kids Club. Although, I would argue Divi might be better for some people because they have a higher dividend yield and a better 1-year dividend growth rate. I don't really like SCHD, even though it has the highest dividend yield, because it is essentially an income-oriented dividend ETF. They do not care about growth, and it's reflected in their top 10 holdings. And they even have a negative 1-year dividend growth rate. Let's move on to the ETF management fee, aka the expense ratio. This matters because it eats away from your gains. I cannot emphasize this enough, especially when you're focused on letting your portfolio compound throughout the years. Lower the fee, the more acceptable it is. Kind of like when going to the movie theaters was a thing. If you went on a Tuesday, it would be $2 a ticket where I grew up, whereas if you went on a Friday, it would be $10. So first up is going to be SCHD, and they have a 0.07% expense ratio, which means for every $10,000 that you make in gains, the ETF will take $7 as their expense ratio. Divi has a 0.38% expense ratio, which means for every $10,000 in gains, the ETF will take $38 as their expense fee. SCHD has a 0.06% expense ratio, which means for every $10,000 in gains, they will take $6. And lastly, Dividend Growth. Their expense ratio is 0.08%, which means for every $10,000 in gains, they take $8 back. After looking at all of the expense ratios, the clear winner is SCHD. But SCHD and Dividend Growth both have really low, negligible amounts of difference in their expense ratios. The loser for sure is Divi. For some of you, this factor probably does not affect your decision. Just like when your wife is stressing over the home remodeling and she can't decide between puke yellow and a dark green color for the living room walls. To you, it does not matter. However, the next criteria is very important. You should pay attention because we are going to see who performed the best. Nothing subjective here, just straight facts and data. And we are only going to look at the past 10 years. I'm not going to backtrack 50 years or whatever, because we are in the age of the internet, where investing became more readily available to the average person like you and me, especially when investing became free. There's no more fees with free brokerages like M1 Finance, Fidelity, Vanguard, and SoFi. And I truly believe as more and more of the common person gets involved in investing, it is going to change the name of the game. It's not like the 1950s or 1960s where only the elite, wealthy, or educated got to invest in the stock market. So I try not to look at data beyond the 2000s. This is just a personal take. Anyways, we are going to look at the total return and the year-over-year CAGR, which stands for compound annual growth rate, which is the return rate you see when you reinvest the dividends and profits back into your portfolio. We are going to compare the dividend ETFs to the market to see if it overperforms or underperforms the benchmark every investor dreams of beating, aka VOO. So for the past 10 years, the market has returned 216%. Year over year, the CAGR is 12%. This is really good. So this is the benchmark. And when we look at SCHD, which invests in the highest dividend yielding companies in the S&P 500, their total return was 88.6%, and their year over year CAGR was 8%. And something that I want to call out is that this ETF came to life on October 2015. And when we look at Divi, for the past 10 years, they have returned 134.5%. The CAGR is 9% year over year. SCHD for the same time period has returned 194.4%, and their year over year CAGR was 11.2%. And last but not least, Dividend Growth for the past 10 years has returned 173.8%. Their year over year CAGR is 11%. Pretty good. So after looking at their past performance, the winner here is SCHD without a doubt. Even though it underperformed the market, it was Usain Bolt out there against the competition. Second place was Dividend Growth. So if we are keeping score, SCHD has 2 of the 3 points so far, and Dividend Growth has 1 point. Next, we are going to look at the dividend history to try and answer the question, is the fund doing a good job managing the companies within its portfolio to grow the dividend payout year over year? High dividend yield or not, what we want to see is a clear trend in the right direction. If the dividend payout is all over the place, that's a red flag in my opinion. Kind of like the trashy people who leave their shopping cart in the parking lot, which blocks someone else's car from parking. I don't know why they can't spend the extra 20 seconds to just walk the cart over to its proper spot. It really makes the skin on my elbows dry. By the way, don't forget to moisturize your elbows and knees. The weather has been really cold lately. Anyways, to get back on topic, the average dividend growth rate will be calculated for the past 8 years. Earlier in this video, the dividend growth value that you saw from the dividend profile was the 1-year dividend growth rate change. But I think 8 years can tell us a better picture. The dividend payout for SCHD, sometimes it's up, right? In 2017, it was $1.74 as the annual dividend. However, the following year, it decreased to $1.62. So that's a change of negative 6.7%. And when you fast forward throughout the years, this is a trend. This is a pattern. Sometimes it's up, sometimes it's down. So the average dividend growth rate for the past 8 years is 3.48%. Divi's dividend history looks a lot better. When you look at 2014 all the way to last year, they have been increasing their dividend payout year over year, except during the pandemic, in which the dividend payout shrunk by negative 2%. But that's understandable because a lot of companies were going into panic mode. The average dividend growth rate, 7.6%. A lot better than SCHD. SCHD, when we look at their dividend history, year over year, they have been consistently growing their dividend payout, even through the pandemic in 2020. They increased their dividend payout by 17.6%. The average dividend growth rate throughout the years, 11.4%. The 1-year dividend growth rate change was only 3.7%, but when you look at its history, 11.4%. And now dividend growth. And based on their dividend history, it does in fact look like they have been increasing their dividend year over year. And over the years, their average dividend growth rate is 10.5%, which is phenomenal. That's amazing. So based on the dividend history and the average dividend growth rate, the winner is going to be SCHD. But a very, very close runner-up is going to be Dividend Growth. Although, if you ain't first, you're last. So we looked at the past, but what about the future? What would $1,000 invested now with a $500 monthly contribution over 20 years look like? I constructed a forecast calculation based on their current yield with the 8-year dividend growth rate and a conservative capital appreciation rate taking into consideration their CAGR and dividend. First up will be SCHD. After 20 years, your portfolio will be $270,000. The total return is 125.7%, and over 20 years, the amount of dividends you receive is $85,000. But look at the snowball compounding effect. On year 1, you get $47.63 in dividends. On year 10, you get $3,490.09. And on year 20, your annual dividend income is going to be $11,751.54. Divi. So after 20 years, your portfolio's valuation should be $334,640. The total return is 176%, and over the 20 years, you're expecting to receive about $116,000 $1,000 in dividends. On year 1, $39. On year 10, $3,800. On year 20, $20,000 in dividends. SCHD, after 20 years, your portfolio should be around $450,000. The total return, 278%. And over the 20 years, you're looking to receive about $151,000 in dividends. On year 1, your dividend payout is $35. On year 10, $4,200. And on year 20, you're expecting to receive $32,069 in dividends. And then there's dividend growth. After 20 years, the portfolio valuation should be around $400,000. The total return, 233%. And over the 20 years, you can expect to receive about $77,700 in dividends. On year 1, your dividend payout should be about $24. By year 10, that's going to be $2,500. And on year 20, you're looking at $14,000 in dividends. I think we have seen enough. We can determine the winner. Not everyone gets a participation trophy here. There's a clear winner and a runner-up after looking at all of the data, metrics, and running forecasts. The winner is SCHD, with a close second place finish to Dividend Growth and a respectable third place to Divi. Honestly, why even bother with Spidey? Dividend growth rate was trash, the return on investment is ugly, and he even eats his own earwax. Would not recommend, 0 out of 10. Like trying to watch any horror movie released in the past few years. What happened to good scary films like Hereditary or The Wailing? This video took a lot of time and energy to research. By doing so, I can now confidently conclude as to why SCHD is so popular on the internet. SCHD really is the best dividend ETF out there. Walking into this video, I had no personal bias or opinion on which ETF would be the best. However, I cannot deny the quality and performance behind SCHD. It's like how in the past, I would just buy the cheapest stocks available. I think it was like 10 pairs for $12 or something. They get the job done, and they're okay, but they fall apart and get holes within a year or so. Then, I discovered high quality stocks like Fox Rivers and Darn Tough, and they also get the job done, but they're a lot more comfortable, long lasting, and much better quality. That's how I see SCHD. They are a high quality stock. Yes, that's a compliment. All of the dividend ETFs serve the same purpose of getting you a dividend yield, but not all of them are high quality. Anyways, this was a fun one to make. If you enjoyed this type of content, please do consider subscribing, my friend. Otherwise, I just wanted to let you know you are now breathing manually. You're breathing in and you're breathing out. Dividend compounders with cheese signing off. Stay safe. Bye-bye.